20 items. Across 70 years, 2 countries, 2 careers, and a life more internally complicated than any single photograph could contain. Grace Kelly did not acquire objects casually. She chose things built to last, made with the same quality of attention she brought to everything, from her technique on screen to the 30 cold water splashes she counted every night before sleeping. You can buy most of what is on this list, some of it for the price of a dinner out. What you cannot buy, and what no list will give you, is the judgment that assembled it in the first place. The Hermès Kelly Bag. There is an image so well known that it has become, over 60 years, almost invisible. A woman in a large fur-collared coat, a structured Hermès bag held in front of her. The woman is Grace Kelly. The year is 1956, and the bag she is holding, which Hermès had been calling the sac à dépêche since 1935, will never be called that again. Hermès officially renamed it the Kelly in 1977, but the mythology was already sealed. Grace had just announced her engagement to Prince Rainier III of Monaco, and the press had descended with a ferocity that surprised even Hollywood. Later, after the wedding, as her pregnancy with Caroline became visible, the bag appeared again, held in front of her abdomen in photograph after photograph. A craftsman's travel bag, turned by one woman's circumstances into something else entirely. The Kelly starts at around $10,000 on the resale market and climbs considerably from there. It is still made by hand. A single artisan works on it for 15 to 20 hours. The waiting list is, at this point, more of a legend than a policy. What holds the value is the object itself, the saddle stitching done in wax linen thread that outlasts the leather, the box calf that develops a mirror-like shine with decades of handling that cannot be replicated on a new bag, the hardware that does not chip. Grace Kelly owned several and carried them until they showed exactly that. Creed Fleurissimo. The second item was commissioned by Rainier himself. He walked into the Creed house, which had been serving European royalty since 1760, and asked them to build a fragrance for his bride. The wedding was April 19th, 1956. What arrived was Fleurissimo, Bulgarian rose, violet, tuberose, and Florentine iris, a composition that smelled like both a woman in full bloom and a garden in a country she was about to make her home. Grace Kelly wore it on her wedding day and, by multiple accounts, for the rest of her life. Creed still makes Fleurissimo, a few $100s for 75 milliliters, and it smells, nearly 70 years later, exactly as intended: floral, precise, unafraid of its own femininity. Which is to say, it smells like her. The Cartier Ruby and Diamond Eternity Band. Most people know about the diamond, the 10.47 carat emerald cut Cartier solitaire that Rainier presented to Grace Kelly, the one that appeared on the cover of every newspaper in December 1955. What most people do not know is that it was the second ring. The first engagement ring Rainier gave Grace Kelly was a ruby and diamond eternity band. The stones alternate in a continuous circuit around the band, red and white, the exact colors of the Monaco flag. It was not accidental. Rainier was a meticulous man, and the ring was a message before it was a jewel. You are Monaco now, and Monaco is yours. Cartier still makes ruby and diamond eternity bands. They are not the same ring. Nothing is. But the visual logic, alternating red and white stones set flush in a continuous gold band, is intact, and the category it belongs to is one Grace Kelly made permanent. The Mark Cross Overnight Case. Alfred Hitchcock did not choose props casually. The Mark Cross Overnight Case that Grace Kelly carries into James Stewart's apartment in Rear Window is doing the work of a character introduction. Her character, Lisa Carroll Fremont, is a woman of specific taste and specific intention, and Hitchcock wanted you to understand both before she spoke a word. The scene in which she opens the case, revealing a negligee, a pair of slippers, and the suggestion of an overnight stay, is one of the most choreographed seduction sequences in American cinema. Mark Cross was founded in Boston in 1845. Ernest Hemingway owned their accessories. The brand was acquired and relaunched in recent years, and the cases are available again. A few hundred to around $1,500, the vintage market is active and often more accessible than people expect. Oliver Goldsmith sunglasses. Grace Kelly treated Oliver Goldsmith sunglasses as architecture, a method of constructing a face within a face, of being present and withheld at the same time. She owned more than 30 pairs. The British optical house, founded in London in 1926, was where she returned most often. In To Catch a Thief, the white cat-eye frames she wears against the Riviera light are among the most copied sunglasses in the history of fashion. The Manhattan style, the frame most associated with her, runs a few hundred to around $600 new. Vintage pairs surface at auction regularly and sell immediately. There is a photograph of Grace Kelly on a Monaco street, circa 1960, wearing a scarf and sunglasses so large they cover nearly a third of her face. She looks completely relaxed. The frames are doing the work that her expression refuses to do. Chateau Krigler 12. The night Grace Kelly won Best Actress for The Country Girl was March 30th, 1955. She was 25 years old. She had been nominated against Judy Garland in what many observers considered a foregone contest, and she won. The dress was green Edith head. The composure was legendary, and the fragrance she wore, according to those present and to the house itself, was Chateau Krigler 12. Chateau Krigler is a French perfume house with origins going back to 1879. Krigler 12 is built on sandalwood, rose, and a series of citrus top notes that read simultaneously as fresh and deeply warm. A garden after rain, the house says, which is not far off. It is still available, and the house remains deliberately small. You will not find it in a department store. You will find it the way she found it, through someone who knew. The Hermes Deojvante Monaco scarf. Deojvante, with God's help. It is Monaco's motto, woven into the border of the Hermes Deojvante, Monaco's scarf alongside the coat of arms of the Grimaldi family. The scarf was designed specifically for the principality, and Grace Kelly wore it with the ease of someone who had fully closed the distance between the woman she had been in Philadelphia and the princess she had become. The story attached to this scarf deserves its own short film. On a yacht in the Mediterranean in 1959, Grace Kelly was stung by a wasp. The sting was on her arm. She removed the scarf, folded it into a sling, tied it with the precision of someone who had been taught these things, and wore it for the remainder of the afternoon. Every photograph from that day shows her smiling. The sling, in silk, is the most elegant injury documentation in the history of the French Riviera. Vintage versions appear at auction and through specialist dealers. The silk Carré format, 90 by 90 centimeters, has not changed since 1937. The Gucci Flora scarf. In 1966, Grace Kelly walked into the Gucci boutique in Milan needing a scarf for a press photograph. The dress she was wearing had a neckline she felt was too low for the occasion, a practical request, an entirely ordinary problem. Rodolfo Gucci happened to be in the boutique that afternoon, and he understood immediately that this was not a moment to hand her something off the shelf. He brought in his most trusted textile artist, Vittorio Accornero, and what they produced over the following weeks was the Flora print, a dense, hand-painted garden of roses, jasmine, ferns, dragonflies, and beetles, rendered in colors so saturated they appear lit from within. Grace Kelly received the first Flora scarf. Gucci kept the print and built it into one of the most recognized textile motifs in fashion history, appearing today on bags, dresses, and runway collections 60 years removed from that afternoon in Milan. Every version of it carries the origin story whether it knows it or not. A princess, a neckline, a decision made in an afternoon. Dior Rouge, 999. 14 lipsticks. That is how many Christian Dior sent Grace Kelly as a personal gift. 14 shades, hand-selected, wrapped in the distinctive Dior packaging of the era. The number tells you something about how the house thought of her. An image they wanted their colors against, full stop. The shade she returned to most was a red. Not orange red, not blue red. A pure, declarative red that existed in the specific register between warm and cool that photographs in every light. On screen, in person, and across the hundreds of photographs taken of her between 1950 and 1982, the red lipstick is a constant. It requires no explanation. Dior Rouge 999 is the closest available equivalent today. Among the 20 items on this list, it is the most accessible, and for many people, the one they will wear out of the store and never put down. The Van Cleef and Arpels Alhambra necklace.
When Van Cleef and Arpels introduced the Alhambra necklace in 1968,
Grace Kelly bought one of the very first. She was there at the origin, acquiring a piece the house had just released, recognizing immediately that it would last. The design is built on quatrefoil shapes, the four-leaf clover, in gold, connected in a continuous chain, each motif edged in beaded gold. The chain moves with the body. It is the kind of necklace that photographs without effort and wears without adjustment. Grace Kelly wore it on yachts, at state occasions, at private dinners, in the garden at the Rock Eagle farm above Monaco, where she grew vegetables and kept largely to herself. The vintage Alhambra single pendant begins at a few $1,000s. The longer motif necklaces she favored run considerably higher. Erno Laszlo. The routine was non-negotiable. Every night, the Phelityl cleansing bar, lathered into the palms, pressed to the face, rinsed. 30 splashes of cold water, counted. The Formula 39 repair cream applied afterward. The entire ritual took less than 10 minutes and was performed, by Grace Kelly's own account, without exception. Erno Laszlo was a Hungarian-born dermatologist who opened a practice in Budapest in the 1920s and relocated to New York in the 1940s. By the time Grace Kelly became a client, his roster included Greta Garbo, Audrey Hepburn, and much of Hollywood's female elite. He did not regard his work as cosmetic. He regarded it as medical. Skin in Laszlo's framework was an organ, and it required treatment, not decoration. The brand still operates. The Phelityl cleansing bar runs under $100. The Formula 3 to 9 is a few hundred. Both remain formulated according to Laszlo's original specifications. The 30 cold water splashes are free, if you are willing to be precise about it. Lancaster Beauty. A Monaco institution, founded in the Principality with a royal warrant connection to the Grimaldi household. In 1965, the brand released a skincare line developed in direct response to Grace Kelly's specific needs. The Ligne Princière, the Princess line, was built for her, formulated for her skin type, the Mediterranean climate, and the demands of constant public visibility under every variety of light. A reigning princess and a beauty house based in her own principality, working in direct collaboration, is entirely logical when you consider what Grace Kelly valued: craftsmanship, loyalty, and things built with a specific purpose. Lancaster delivered all three. Their current line begins around $50. The Cartier Trinity ring. It began as a collaboration between Louis Cartier and Jean Cocteau in 1924. 3 interlocking bands in yellow gold, white gold, and rose gold, designed to move against each other with the natural motion of the wrist. A daily object, built for continuous wear, meant to become part of the hand's visual identity. Grace Kelly wore the Trinity on ordinary days, not ceremonial ones, which is the correct way to wear a piece designed to move. The 3 metals carried, in the piece's early mythology, the meanings of love, fidelity, and friendship. Cocteau had his own interpretations. You are free to have yours. It has been in continuous production for a century, beginning at entry-level Cartier pricing. It looks the same. It functions the same. Among the jewelry on this list, it is the most suited to daily life. Pearls. Look at enough photographs of Grace Kelly and the pearl strand stops reading as an accessory. Worn with a suit, with a cocktail dress, with a turtleneck, with nothing more formal than a cardigan. The pearls are constant across 30 years of public life, and the constancy is the point. It registers over time as conviction. She once said that the pearl is the queen of gems and the gem of queens. She meant it. During her Hollywood years, the single strand, clean, uniformly matched, worn close to the throat, was her most consistent visual signature. After her engagement to Rainier, her pearl jewelry grew considerably more significant. She met with Jacques Arpels personally to select pieces for her new life,
choosing a triple-stranded Van Cleef and Arpels necklace and earrings that appeared in her first official portraits as Princess of Monaco, and which she wore from her honeymoon to her children's christenings.
Mikimoto, the Japanese house that perfected the cultured pearl in 1893, also maintained a long association with her, producing a Grace de Monaco limited edition strand in her name. Both houses still operate. The single strand, in whatever form you choose it, remains exactly what it was in her hands, a decision that requires no further explanation. White kid gloves. In Hollywood in the early 1950s, white kid gloves were a social decision. A woman who wore gloves had made a statement about how she expected to be received. Grace Kelly wore them constantly, to studio meetings, to premieres, to lunch, on transatlantic flights. A fashion writer of the period described them as her visiting card, the first thing you understood about her before she spoke. The construction was precise. Kid leather, seamed at the back of the hand, button fastened at the wrist, fitted to the taper of the fingers without a millimeter of excess. Sermoneta Gloves in Rome has been making kid leather gloves since 1964, under $50. Dents in England, in continuous operation since 1777, makes them for a little more. Both houses still cut and stitch by hand. Apart from the Lawrence at the end of this list, the gloves are the most accessible item here, and among the most visually transformative. Ferragamo Pumps. A word on the listicles. There are dozens of Grace Kelly style guides, and a notable number include flat shoes, ballerinas, loafers, kitten heels at the most adventurous. Grace Kelly wore Ferragamo heels, not occasionally, consistently. Salvatore Ferragamo built his craft in Hollywood in the 1920s, fitting shoes to Greta Garbo and Mary Pickford before returning to Florence, and he was her cobbler of preference throughout her adult life. The heel heights she favored ran between 2 and 3 inches, high enough to alter the body's line, low enough to last an entire official day. Ferragamo's classic pump line begins in the mid-hundreds. The construction is what you are paying for: the last, the leather, the heel attachment. Ferragamo built his technique on the premise that the foot is an architectural problem and the shoe is its solution. Grace Kelly agreed. The Emilio Pucci silk caftan. The caftan tells you what someone is like when no one is watching. Not entirely, but closer than most garments. Grace Kelly and Emilio Pucci on the Riviera in the 1960s. Is Grace Kelly at her least guarded? a woman in vivid color, moving freely, occupying a holiday like someone who had genuinely earned it. Pucci had been dressing the European jet set since the early 1950s, producing bold, kaleidoscopic prints in featherweight silk jersey that defined a decade of luxurious leisure. His geometry was intense and mathematically precise, never quite repeated. On the yacht, at private dinners in the summer months, Pucci still produces silk caftans, with archive prints periodically reissued. Authentic vintage pieces from the 1960s and 1970s surface regularly on the secondary market, and the silk, 50 years on, remains in remarkable condition. Alexandre de Paris. Alexandre Raymond, known professionally as Alexandre de Paris, was the most significant European hairdresser of the second half of the 20th century, and for Grace Kelly, the closest thing to a visual collaborator she had outside her clothing designers. He styled her for the 1956 wedding, for official portraits, and over the course of their working relationship, produced more than 300 custom hair pieces for her alone, clips, barrettes, combs, and bands built for specific occasions, specific outfits, specific photographs. What Grace Kelly understood about hair and what Alexandre helped her execute, 300 custom pieces over a career is a very thorough education in geometry. The house still operates. The accessories, hinged clips, resin barrettes, carved combs, begin at around $60 for smaller pieces. The Rolleiflex Twin Lens Reflex Camera. Grace Kelly was photographed more than almost any other woman of her era. What is less known is what she did with that fact. She became a photographer herself. She traveled with a Rolleiflex twin lens reflex camera throughout her adult life. The Rolleiflex requires the operator to look down into a ground glass viewfinder rather than through a lens. An orientation that changes how you see a subject entirely, because you are no longer eye to eye with it. The images she produced were not amateur work. They were considered, composed, and consistently surprising. Ordinary life in Monaco, her children unposed, the farm, the garden, the view from a car window at dawn. The Rolleiflex 2.8F or 3.5F, the models she most likely favored, is available through camera dealers and auction houses for a few hundred to around $1,200 depending on condition. Film is still being manufactured for it. Every other item on this list concerns how Grace Kelly appeared to others. This one is about how she saw. That is a different kind of intimacy entirely. D.H. Lawrence. Birds, Beasts, and Flowers. The least expensive item on this list is D.H. Lawrence's Birds, Beasts, and Flowers, a poetry collection published in 1923, and it is the one that tells you the most. Grace Kelly began performing poetry publicly in the mid-1970s. The program she eventually took on tour, to Edinburgh, to London, to cultural festivals across Europe, was built substantially around Lawrence's collection. Poems about animals and the natural world that are, beneath their subject matter, meditations on wildness and restraint, on the life that exists just outside the frame. She named the program after Lawrence's title. She performed it herself on stage, with musicians accompanying her, for audiences who came expecting the princess and found instead a woman with a serious, private relationship to language. A used paperback costs under $18. A fine edition, for someone who takes the object seriously, can be found for under $50. Every other item on this list can be acquired. This one requires attention. A book carried for decades, read and marked and returned to. The closest thing on this list to her actual interior life.
Thank you everyone so much for watching Cultured Elegance. If you'd love to support the channel, you can become a channel member today by clicking Join at the bottom of the screen. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.